Iceland's Reykjanes Peninsula has produced 9 volcanic eruptions in less than 2 years. The town of Grindavík, a fishing community of 3,800 people, has been evacuated, abandoned, partially returned to, and evacuated again more times than residents can count. Lava has burned through protective barriers. Fissures have split streets and pipelines in half. A subsidence valley opened beneath the town itself, swallowing roads, severing water mains, and cracking buildings down to their foundations. The Icelandic government spent $440 million buying the entire town because it concluded it could no longer be safely inhabited. And as of March 2026, nearly 20 million cubic meters of magma have accumulated beneath the Svartsengi system, approaching the highest threshold ever recorded before an eruption in this cycle. The warning window before lava breaks the surface is 30 minutes. The next eruption is not a question of if. But here's the detail that tells the real story. On April 1st, 2025, at around 9:45 in the morning, local time, the Icelandic Meteorological Office confirmed a new fissure had opened north of Grindavík's protective barrier. The fissure grew to 700 meters in length within the hour. The aviation color code was raised to red. Grindavík was evacuated. The Blue Lagoon was evacuated. Several residents refused to leave. And then the IMO released a detail buried inside its hazard bulletin. The GPS signals recorded before that eruption were stronger than those observed during any previous event in the entire Sundhnúkar crater series. The magma tunnel running beneath the surface had reached 11 kilometers in length, the longest measured since the sequence began in November 2023, and the fissure breached the protective barrier that emergency crews had spent months reinforcing. Not from the outside. It broke through from within. To understand how Iceland arrived at this moment, you have to watch what the Reykjanes Peninsula has been doing since the ground first cracked open. At around 10 in the evening, local time on November 10th, 2023, approximately 20,000 earthquakes struck the Reykjanes Peninsula within 24 hours. The ground near Grindavík dropped. A subsidence valley opened directly above a magma intrusion running beneath the town. Roads cracked, pipes severed, buildings split. The entire population of 3,800 people evacuated that same night. At around 10 in the evening, local time on December 18th, 2023, the first eruption from the Sundhnúkar crater row broke the surface. Lava fountains reached 100 meters into the sky, visible from Reykjavik, 42 kilometers away. Residents were allowed to return on December 22nd. Barrier construction began. And then it got worse. At around 4 in the morning, local time on January 14th, 2024, a second eruption opened a fissure inside the town's protective perimeter. A workman operating construction equipment near the fissure zone went missing, believed to have fallen into a ground crack. A ninth on July 16th, 2025, which began at around 4 in the morning local time after earthquakes shook the area just before midnight. It ran until August 5th. 9 eruptions, 20 months. Here is what the science reveals, and it is stranger than anything a headline can carry. The Reykjanes Peninsula sits directly on the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, the seam where the North American and Eurasian tectonic plates pull apart at approximately 2.5 centimeters per year. That separation creates a permanent channel for magma rising from the mantle to pool in shallow reservoirs at 4 kilometers depth, pressurize, and fracture through whatever surface sits above. The system had been dormant for approximately 800 years before 2021. Professor Þorvaldur Þórðarson, a volcanology expert at the University of Iceland, has stated directly that the last time the Reykjanes system was this active, it ran from the year 1210 to 1240. 3 decades of continuous eruptions. Dr. Evgenia Ilyinskaya of the University of Leeds has named what is now unfolding the new Reykjanes fires. Elísabet Pálmadóttir of the Icelandic Meteorological Office has said publicly that there is a reasonable chance the peninsula has entered a volcanic period lasting tens to hundreds of years. Benedikt Gunnar Ófeigsson, head of deformation measurements at the IMO, told journalists in November 2025 that the system is now harder to read than it was at the beginning. When the activity first started, land inflation was rapid and eruption timing was predictable. Now, he said, nothing is certain. This could end with an eruption, or without one. We are simply waiting. The warning window confirmed before the August 22, 2024 eruption was 30 minutes from first signal to surface lava. Here is the problem that is not making headlines. On February 9, 2024, the Icelandic government passed a bill to purchase every residential property in Grindavík. 61 billion Icelandic kroner. The entire town. Not because lava destroyed it. Only 3 houses were consumed by lava. The remaining 1,800 properties were purchased because scientists told the government the risk beneath them was permanent and worsening. But between the November 2023 evacuation and the January 14, 2024 eruption that came through the barriers, residents had been allowed back. They slept in homes sitting above a mobile magma sheet. They walked streets already split by subsidence. And when the fissure opened inside the barrier, not outside it, inside it, the 30-minute clock had already been running while they slept. The IMO's own hazard assessment states explicitly that 2 scenarios remain active. A fissure erupting from a vent north of the barriers that flows through existing ground cracks and re-emerges inside the town itself, or a fissure opening directly within Grindavík's boundary with no barrier between it and the houses. Both scenarios are assessed as possible. Neither has a mitigation solution. If the magma accumulating beneath Svartsengi in March 2026 is approaching 20 million cubic meters, the same threshold that preceded multiple previous eruptions in this cycle, and if the warning window is 30 minutes, and if the fissure on April 1st, 2025 was already strong enough to breach the reinforced barriers, what does the 10th eruption look like? If a volcanic era can last decades or centuries, as the science of the 10 to 1240 eruptions confirms it already has, what is the plan for the power plant supplying electricity and hot water to 30,000 people that sits inside the hazard zone? And if the government knew the ground beneath Grindavík was compromised in November 2023 and still allowed residents to return in December, and the barriers were still unfinished in January when the fissure came through from inside. At what point does waiting become a decision that someone has to answer for? The 9th eruption ended on August 5th, 2025. The magma is accumulating again. And the Sundanukur crater row, 4 kilometers north of the homes that remain, is still there. 11 kilometers of pressurized tunnel sitting in the dark, waiting for the 30-minute clock to start again.